I knew something was wrong the second I walked into the room and saw her sitting where I always sat, leaned back like the air itself belonged to her, wearing that same navy suit she used every time she bulldozed her way into control, smiling like she had already won, her hand resting on the chair arm like a challenge, like she was daring me to say something. She did not look at me when she spoke, just tilted her head slightly and said my presence was no longer necessary. Her voice was calm, smooth, confident, the kind of tone people use when they think the room already agrees with them, too compliant. Officers stepped forward at the same time, clipboards ready, badges already printed. Like this was planned, like a performance. I was not some random employee. I was the kid who had grown into the systems, who helped wire the backbone of everything she was now claiming. But I said nothing. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I reached into my bag and pulled out a plain folder, no logo, no label, just white paper, and I placed it on the table between us. Slowly, I tapped it once and said, Clause 11C. She laughed, not loud enough to sound scared, just enough to sound dismissive, like I was a sore loser. Clinging to old rules, she thought the folder meant nothing, and that was the point. I turned and walked out without another word. No one stopped me, not even the CEO. They just stared like they had watched a substitute teacher kick out the principal mid-assembly in the hallway. My steps echoed louder in my chest than on the floor. I let her have the moment, let her show slides and talk about efficiency and speed, let her sit in that chair, thinking it was hers. She had no idea what she had already done, because earlier that morning, the system had logged her signature, one she should never have touched. She thought forging it would make my exit clean. What she did not understand was that by doing so, she triggered the one clause designed for this exact situation. Clause 11C was not symbolic. It was a fail-safe written for power grabs without protocol, and I knew the countdown had already started. She spent weeks tearing through departments, flattening structures, calling it modernization. Every short cut she took activated something I had buried years ago, silent, awed. Its legal checks mirrored logs, she thought. Revoking my badge erased me. She did not understand that access was not a card or a password. It was history, permissions, fingerprints in code, spread across systems older than her career. My account was marked inactive, but underneath, it still pinged every compliance module. Every action she took stacked more evidence. She merged approval chains, renamed divisions, killed oversight, all without reading the fine print. She even pushed a system update, thinking she was cleaning house. She had no idea the triggers were not just digital. They were legal. Every move she made without dual authorization escalated automatically. I did not interfere. I just watched and documented, because the system did not care how anyone felt. It cared about patterns, and she was painting violations everywhere. She thought she had full control, but she never saw the root ledger, because no one ever bothered to learn how deep it ran. And while she stood in that boardroom talking about the future, the system had already begun building a case, and I was the only one who knew what would happen when the clock reached zero. And that was when the first alert quietly left the system, and everything changed. I watched everything from a quiet corner of the building, a place no one cared about anymore, an old mezzanine desk near an abandoned HR kiosk that still hummed even though no one used it. She thought revoking my access shut me out, but what she really did was move me into the blind spot, the kind of place where you see more because no one thinks you are watching. I did not need to be reassigned. I did not need permission, because some systems never forget their creators. She was busy giving orders, renaming teams, calling meetings, talking about speed and vision. Every time she clicked approve, Another, silent flag, went up somewhere deep in the back-end logs, started duplicating, routing themselves to external compliance mirror she did not know existed. She believed she had simplified governance, but all she had done was remove the guardrails that kept her from driving straight off a cliff. Her first week, she renamed departments without logging justification. That alone tripped a legal anomaly. Her second week, she merged financial approval chains into one hers that activated a conditional monitor I had added after an old it scare years back. Week 3, she collapsed security roles into one position held by a guy who barely understood his own credentials. He did not know his login was still pinging from an obsolete tunnel I built back when redundancy mattered, and me, I was labeled inactive, a cosmetic tag, nothing more beneath it. My credentials were still being checked by quarterly integrity routines. Every check she triggered added another entry to the encrypted vault. I used to joke that watching her work was like watching someone play Jenga with live wires. She even ordered a full system cleanup the night before filing my termination. They thought they were purging old architecture. What they were really doing was validating every fail-safe I had ever written. My triggers were not emotional, they were procedural. Every governance change, without proper sign-off, escalated automatically. She disabled oversight, thinking it gave her freedom. But that was the switch that forced escalation under Provision 19.4. I never needed to sabotage anything, I just documented quietly. Letting the logs do what logs do, she gave herself access to everything except the one thing that mattered, the root ledger, because no one ever taught her that legacy systems are not clutter, they are anchors. She thought old meant useless. She never asked why those protocols existed. She never asked who wrote them. She never asked what would happen if they were broken. Even after my badge was revoked, I still got notifications routed through an archive channel, marked obsolete. No one touched it since before she graduated college, except me. Every morning, I checked it with my coffee, watched the evidence pile up. Authority conflicts, override chains, mismatched approvals. It stacked like bricks around her. She thought the system worked for her. Systems do not work for people, they work on rules. And she was breaking all of them. The chain reaction was not coming. It had already started. Clause 11C sat buried in the charter between boring sections. No one reads. It was not flashy. It was precise. I helped write it years ago, after another executive tried to gut operations without understanding consequences. Legal asked me what I needed. I told them I wanted a veto that lived beyond me. They gave it to me. Clause 11C required one thing, a verified handoff with my signature. Without it, everything froze. She never read that far. She told her assistant to clear the paperwork. Someone forged it. I knew the second it happened. At 7:14, the system logged a signature under my name, IP flagged, device unknown. The watermark confirmed it. The signature did not even match. They pulled it from an old document, sloppy, rushed, and the moment it hit the system, the clause went live. Legal was notified. Odd. Its duplicated timers started ticking. And while she stood in front of the board, smiling and selling her vision, the system was already asking one question: why does this signature look like a lie? And when that question finishes compiling its answer, there is no stopping what comes next. The boardroom smelled like citrus water and artificial confidence, the kind that comes from expensive planning sessions and rehearsed certainty. She stood at the head of the table, clicking through slides, talking about alignment and speed, like she was hosting a show. She said words like lean and unified and future, ready, and people nodded, because that is what people do when they are not sure. If resistance is allowed, I sat off to the side unnoticed, just another quiet observer, while the system did its work. She never saw the email that went out minutes after the forged handoff, never heard the soft digital confirmation that Clause 11C was active. It was not dramatic. It was methodical. The governance engine did not accuse. It verified two versions of the same document, one signed, one clean. My original still untouched, hers stamped and flawed, a mismatch like a crack in glass that spreads silently. The clock had started counting down, not on the wall, not on her tablet, but deep in the legal backend, where tone and charm mean nothing. She clicked to a slide showing a new org chart, her name bold at the top, mine buried, flattened into a box labeled operations. Someone from regulatory asked about oversight. She waved it off, called it legacy, thinking that word made her sound brave. What she did not know was that 60 seconds earlier, the system had already flagged her as a sole authority in a dual control environment. That one flag alone was enough to wake the rest. She kept talking, referencing startups and investors, telling stories about scale and disruption. She never noticed the door open behind her. The general counsel assistant walked in quietly, holding a single sheet. She did not interrupt. She did not speak. She just fed the paper into the display console. The slide vanished, replaced by plain text. The room went silent as a neutral system voice read the words Clause 11C, activated, executive override, invalid, termination without protocol acknowledgement, verified. The tone was flat, not angry, not dramatic, just factual. Her smile froze mid-breath. She turned slowly and stared at the screen. There was my name, my signature, time-stamped from that morning beneath it. The odd, it watermark, real and unmovable. And in the corner, a blinking verification token counting down. She tried to swipe back to her slides. The tablet rejected her input access. Frozen, her fingers hovered like she was trying to touch a ghost. The CEO leaned forward, asking what this meant, but no one answered, because the system already had. It froze her authority, retroactively flagged every action she had taken. Since the trigger, every rename, every override, every approval now sat under review. She was still standing, still calculating. I could see it in her eyes. She was searching the room for allies, for someone who would speak for her. This was not a conversation anymore. This was process. The lead counsel arrived moments later, carrying the original unsigned form. He held it up and spoke calmly, confirming the forgery, confirming the escalation. No accusations, no shouting, just confirmation. Her confidence cracked, not shattered, just enough to show fear. She tried to explain, but the logs spoke louder. The credential trail matched her device, her access, her key. No one needed to argue. The evidence was complete. When security stepped in, they did not touch her. They did not need to. She walked out on her own heels, clicking like a metronome, mocking the end of her control. She passed me at the door, and our eyes met. She did not ask out loud, but the question was there. How did you do this? And I did not answer, because the truth was simple. I did nothing. I let the system do exactly what it was built to do. And that was only the beginning of what it would reveal. They called me back into the room like you call a mechanic after the engine stops, not with applause, not with blame, just necessity. The air felt heavy, like everyone had realized how close they came to losing control of something they never truly understood. I did not sit. I stood near the table while the CEO asked the only question that mattered: if any of this could be reversed. I handed him a single page, nothing fancy, just a protocol summary, 3 bullet points: reinstatement of operational architect, suspension of the implicated executive board, oversight required. Going forward, he read it slowly, like each line weighed more than the last. The General Counsel nodded, confirming it had been approved years ago by the same board, now staring at it in silence. No one remembered signing it, but the signatures were there. That is how systems work. They remember even when people forget. Someone asked why I did not stop it sooner. I told them the truth. I designed the system to stop itself. That answer landed harder than any accusation. This was not revenge. It was insurance. I built it after watching too many smart people believe charisma could replace structure. The CEO handed me my badge, the same one she deactivated earlier. I took it, and the reader flashed green, like it never stopped trusting me, because it had not. The room shifted, not with celebration, but with understanding. They realized the architecture they mocked was the only thing that saved them. She was gone. Now walking down a hallway flanked by security, not restrained, not chased, just removed. Everything she touched was under review, weeks of decisions frozen mid-air. The board sat quietly, absorbing the scale of it. Not a scandal, not a coup, just a system executing its fail-safe. I returned to the control vault, the windowless room where the real company lived. Screens hummed softly, indifferent to human drama. I logged in the same way. I always had. No flourish, no triumph, credentials accepted, restoration in progress. The CEO stood behind me, watching bars fill, slowly rolling back, permissions reinstating. Oversight channels. Every line of text felt like the company apologizing to itself for trusting the wrong short cuts. He said quietly, "We trusted her." I did not answer, because trust without structure is a weakness, not a virtue. She came in talking about modernization, flattening hierarchies, killing redundancy, calling it efficiency. What she really did was remove every safety net built over decades. It worked until it did not, until the system remembered who built it. I never designed it to prevent failure. I designed it to survive betrayal. That is the difference. The screens continued restoring access, locking in oversight, mirroring logs. The quiet hum of servers felt steady, reassuring, like a heartbeat returning after a scare. No speeches, no victory laps, just repair. When the progress bar reached halfway, I knew the hardest part was already over. The company would survive. The truth would surface, and everyone in that boardroom would think twice before ignoring the boring clauses again. I glanced at the audit queue, still processing more data than they realized, and buried in those logs were answers to questions no one had asked yet about what else she altered, what else she signed, what else she broke. And when those answers finished compiling, they would not just explain what happened, they would decide what happened next. And that realization was about to hit harder than her removal ever did. The investigation did not explode. It unfolded slowly, like a tide creeping in, while everyone was still arguing about the weather. Every system she touched began telling its story. Approvals that skipped steps, reports, rerouted authority, collapsed into single names. The board thought removing her ended it. They were wrong. That was just the seal breaking once external counsel stepped in. Time stopped meaning anything. Meetings turned into evidence, reviews, slides turned into timelines. Every decision she made over 2 months was replayed without her voice explaining it away. The system did not care about intent, it cared about sequence. And the sequence painted a picture no one liked. I sat in the control vault most days, not because anyone ordered me to, but because this was where the truth surfaced, raw and unfiltered. I watched audit packets assemble themselves, linking actions across platforms, finance, security, HR, infrastructure, each one verified, each one time-stamped. She had tried centralized power, thinking it made her efficient. What it really did was make attribution Easy, every override pointed back to her credentials. Every bypass carried her approval key. Even the people she thought would protect her were now distancing themselves because the data left no room for loyalty. A few executives tried to argue context. They said she moved fast because the market demanded it. The council listened politely, then showed them the clause language speed does not void governance efficiency, does not excuse fraud silence, followed the system restored dual controls, reinstated check. Reactivated roles, she eliminated people, came back into meetings, confused, grateful, scared. The company was relearning how to breathe with both lungs again. The CEO aged 10 years in 2 weeks. I could see it in his posture. The way he read reports twice now, he stopped trusting instinct and started asking for documentation. That was the real change, not her removal. But the lesson that followed I did not celebrate. I never wanted this to happen. I built safeguards hoping they would never fire. But when they do, you let them run their course, because stopping them midway causes more damage than letting them finish the odd. It Q kept growing, uncovering things even I did not expect. Contracts altered without review, risk thresholds raised quietly, exceptions granted and never logged. She had not just broken rules, she had rewritten them without permission. The board finally understood that what almost destroyed them was not malice, but arrogance, the belief that experience and charm could replace process. That belief cost them millions in legal fees and months of recovery. But it could have cost them everything. Late one evening, the council asked me a question I had not expected. If she had not forged the signature, would any of this have happened? I told him no. Clause 11C would have stayed dormant. The system would have logged concerns, but nothing would have escalated. She crossed the one line that turned monitoring into action. He nodded slowly, like a man realizing how thin the margin really was. I went back to the logs that night and noticed something new, a secondary trigger, compiling something older, patterns that predated her arrival. I had built it years ago, but never seen it complete. The system was not just closing a case, it was surfacing weaknesses that allowed it to happen in the first place. And as I watched the compilation bar move forward, I realized the story was not over, because what the system was about to reveal was not just what she did, but who else helped her do it. The second report landed quietly, no announcement, no emergency meeting, just a notification buried in the audit stream marked correlation analysis complete. I opened it expecting cleanup details, maybe a few process gaps. What I saw instead made my chest tighten. The system had finished mapping influence paths, not just actions, but approvals that enabled them. Names appeared, not just hers, but others who signed without reading, others who bypassed checks because it was easier, others who stayed silent when things felt wrong but profitable. The board thought the danger walked out in heels weeks ago. They were wrong. The real risk was still sitting in conference rooms, still nodding during meetings, still saying nothing. The data showed patterns, repeated approvals from the same 3 executives, expedited reviews always at the same hours, emails marked urgent with no follow-up questions. This was not conspiracy. It was convenience, and convenience is how systems rot. The council reviewed the report line by line, face unreadable. He did not ask me what to do next. He already knew, because once evidence exists, the response is no longer optional. Interviews began quietly. Titles did not protect anyone. This time people were placed on leave. Some resigned before they were asked to explain the company. Culture shifted. Overnight meetings slowed, documentation doubled. No one joked about legacy systems anymore. I watched the cleanup continue. Privileges adjusted, committees reinstated oversight, restored. The architecture was healing, but scars remained. The CEO asked me one final question weeks later, when Things finally felt stable. Could this happen again? I told him yes. If they forgot, the lesson: systems do not fail all at once. They fail because people believe rules are optional. That belief spreads faster than any virus. But I also told him the architecture was stronger now, not because of new tech, but because of awareness. They had seen what happens when safeguards are mocked. I returned to the vault one last time before stepping back into my role. The screens were calm cues, empty monitors green. I thought about the morning I walked into that boardroom and saw someone sitting in my chair, thinking authority could be taken like furniture. I smiled slightly, not out of pride, but relief. The system worked, not because I fought, not because I shouted, but because I trusted the design. And as I logged out, I noticed one final status line on the screen: clause 11C resolved, archive locked, oversight permanent. I left the room knowing the company would move on, forget details, rewrite the story. But somewhere deep in the code, a quiet reminder would always exist, waiting, watching, ready, because the most dangerous failures never announce themselves. They smile, sit down, and say your presence is no longer required. And if you are not prepared, that is exactly when everything breaks.